The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Daniel stepped out of his small, weather-worn house, stretching and breathing in the crisp morning air. Saturday mornings had always been his favorite, the only time he could take a break from the back-breaking grind of construction work and simply exist. Today, though, felt different. There in the driveway sat his brand-new truck. The polished chrome gleamed in the early light, throwing back little shards of brilliance that danced across the yard and glinted in Daniel's tired eyes. For a moment he simply stood there, hands on his hips, feeling a rare sense of pride swell inside him. The truck wasn't just a machine. It was a milestone. For years, Daniel had come home from long shifts with sore muscles and dirty clothes, too exhausted to do more than collapse into bed. He had endured late notices on bills, arguments about money, and the crushing weight of trying to be a good husband and father while keeping his family afloat. This truck was proof that all of it, every hour of overtime, every sleepless night, had been worth it. Finally, he murmured, running his calloused fingers along the smooth metal. Something that's mine. Something perfect. Inside the house, the faint sound of little feet pattered against the wooden floor. His 3-year-old son, Jake, had been up since dawn, chattering to his toys, building imaginary cities with his blocks, and imitating the work he saw his father do. Jake's favorite possession was a plastic toy hammer. He carried it everywhere, knocking on furniture, pretending to fix things. But Daniel wasn't paying attention this morning. His mind was elsewhere, already planning how he would pay off the truck faster, how to secure more overtime, how to keep everything running smoothly. He didn't notice when the back door creaked open, or when Jake toddled into the yard, dragging along his plastic hammer and dangerously the real hammer Daniel had left out the night before. To Jake, the shiny new truck wasn't just Daddy's, it was theirs. And like Daddy, he wanted to make things better. So he took his hammer, stood on tiptoe, and began to work. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was quiet at first, harmless. Then a small dent appeared. Jake giggled, pleased. Another dent, another giggle. To him this was building. This was love. Daniel's head snapped up at the metallic sound. It was out of place. Sharp, deliberate, and wrong. He turned toward the driveway and froze. Jake stood there grinning, holding the hammer high. The driver's side door, once flawless, was now dotted with little half-moon dents. Jake! The shout ripped out of Daniel's chest before he could stop it. His son flinched, startled, the hammer slipping from his tiny fingers and clattering onto the concrete. But it was too late. The damage was done, and Daniel's heart clenched as if the dents had been hammered into him. Something inside him snapped. Months of stress, sleepless nights, and financial strain boiled over. His hard-won pride turned instantly to fury. He felt hot blood rush to his face, his breath coming in short, harsh bursts. He stormed across the yard, grabbed Jake roughly by the arm, and yanked him away from the truck. The boy stumbled, terrified, his lip quivering, but Daniel was blind with rage. "You ruined it!" he shouted, voice hoarse. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jake didn't understand. He tried to speak, but only a cry came out. Then Daniel saw the hammer lying on the ground. He picked it up, his knuckles white, and without thinking, without seeing, he brought it down. Once, twice, over and over. The sound of metal against fragile bone filled the air, mingling with Jake's screams. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice begged him to stop, but the storm inside him was too strong. When he finally came back to himself, the world felt eerily quiet. Jake lay on the ground, sobbing weakly, his small hands a mangled mess of blood and swelling. The hammer slipped from Daniel's grip and clattered to the ground. He staggered back, horror creeping in like cold water. "Oh God! Oh my God!" He scooped Jake into his arms, his own hands shaking. There was no time to think, no time to process. He threw the boy into the passenger seat of the truck, dents forgotten now, and sped toward the hospital, heart hammering, stomach twisting. Jake whimpered beside him, clutching what was left of his fingers. Every sound, every tear was a knife in Daniel's chest. The hospital was a blur of noise and light. Nurses rushed Jake into the emergency room as Daniel stood there, numb and shaking. His shirt was soaked with his son's blood. He sank into a plastic chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. He had meant to protect his son from harm, from hardship, from everything. And instead, the image of the hammer flashed before his eyes. The sound of the blows echoed in his ears. Hours passed. Daniel sat there, barely moving, until a doctor finally emerged. His face was somber, his hands still gloved. "We did everything we could," the doctor said quietly. "But the bones were crushed beyond repair. We had to amputate several fingers on both hands. He'll survive. He'll need therapy. But he's alive." Alive. The word felt like a blessing and a curse all at once. When Daniel was allowed to see Jake, the sight shattered him. His little boy lay in a hospital bed, his hands wrapped in thick white bandages. His eyes lit up when he saw his father, as if nothing could erase the bond between them. "Daddy!" Jake whispered, voice hoarse. "I'm sorry about the truck." Daniel's breath caught. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Jake blinked up at him, confused. When are my fingers gonna grow back? The question broke Daniel's heart into pieces. He turned away, gripping the bed railing so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to promise Jake that everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. For days, Daniel stayed at the hospital, sleeping in the chair by Jake's bed. Each time the nurses changed his bandages and Jake cried in pain, Daniel felt another piece of himself crumble. He couldn't look his wife in the eye, couldn't explain, couldn't forgive himself. When they finally brought Jake home, the house felt different, quieter, heavier. Life after the hospital was a strange, unbearable routine. Daniel went through the motions, helping Jake eat, making sure he took his medication, but inside, he was a shell of himself. The truck sat in the driveway, its dents still visible, but now it seemed less like a prize and more like a monument to his failure. Nights were the worst. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the phantom sound of the hammer over and over. His wife tried to talk to him, but he couldn't face her disappointment. He avoided her gaze, too ashamed to speak. Jake was resilient, adapting quickly to using his bandaged hands, but every time he winced in pain, Daniel flinched as if struck. One evening, after putting Jake to bed, Daniel went into the garage. The hammer still lay on the workbench where he had left it. He picked it up, staring at it in the dim light. His reflection stared back at him from the polished head of the tool, tired, haunted, hollow-eyed. He thought of all the things he had worked for, the long hours, the sacrifices, the truck that had once made him so proud. He thought of the moments he had missed with Jake, the bedtime stories left untold, the games left unplayed because he had been too tired. And he thought of that morning, of Jake's smile, of his giggles as he tapped the truck, of the look in his eyes when he asked about his fingers. The weight of it all pressed down on Daniel until he could barely breathe. The next morning, the neighbors found the garage door closed, the truck idling, and Daniel slumped in the driver's seat. The house was never the same after that. Jake grew up with the memory of that day etched into him like a scar. Because it was. The world felt sharper, quieter, more fragile, but he carried with him the love of a father who had worked himself to the bone for his family and the terrible lesson of what anger could do. Years later, as a grown man with children of his own, Jake would sit them down and tell them the story, not to frighten them, but to teach them. Things can be replaced, he would say softly, holding up his hands. The scars were still there, a permanent reminder. People can forgive quickly, love loudly, and never ever let anger decide what your hands will do. His children would listen, wide-eyed as Jake spoke. They would reach for his hands, touching the scars, feeling the weight of the lesson that had cost so much. Jake never forgot his father's love or his rage, and in a way, he carried both with him, making sure that his own children never had to learn that lesson the hard way.